Welcome to the Three Wise Men of Divorce, Money, Psych, and Law podcast. Sit down with the California divorce experts, financial divorce consultant Mark Hill, psychologist Scott Weiner, and attorney Shawn Weber for a frank and casual conversation about divorce, separation, co-parenting, and the difficult decisions real people like you face during these tough times. We know that if you are looking at divorce or separation, it can be scary and overwhelming. With combined experience of over 70 years in divorce and conflict management, we are here for you and look forward to helping by sharing our unique ideas, thoughts, and perspectives on divorce, separation, and co-parenting. Okay, here we are, another podcast for the Three Wise Men of Divorce. And this week's subject is how do we, I want to get this right, because we talked about this before we got on, making it through without making it worse. Did I get it right?
Yes.
Making it through without getting it worse. And so what do we mean by that?
Well, what often happens is that people get divorced for a reason. The person who is inaugurating the leaving has an agenda, and it may or may not be that that person has been wronged or that person wishes to be free of this marriage. But whatever the case, it is almost never true that people break out of a marriage because everything is sunshine, lollipops, roses, and what have you. So you've got a situation in which people are psychologically suffering. That's right at the beginning. That's how it almost always goes. And the divorce process, as conventionally done, is a war. So you've got two people not happy with each other at war, each bringing to bear the tools that are allowed conventionally in the system. So it gets rough and it makes it worse.
So war, does it have to be a war, Mark?
I don't think so. It's interesting. I'm not an attorney. I'm a financial divorce consultant. So people come to me to talk about ostensibly the money. That's what they want to kind of get into the nitty gritty. But I always ask them how the relationship is with their spouse. And people generally don't hate the other person. They generally don't want to hurt them. They just want to make sure they don't get hurt themselves and get through it. And what my experience is, both personally and from watching clients' experience, is that the adversarial system does make those relationships worse because it pits you against each other and it doesn't encourage you to kind of work together.
And the adversarial system meaning court.
Yeah.
Hiring sharp lawyers to go do battle for you.
Put on their armor and go to war on your behalf.
That's the adversarial system. We were taught the adversarial system in law school, and what you're taught to do is be a zealous advocate for your client. And I was thinking, well, what's a zealot? It's kind of a crazy person, isn't it? And so we're trained to be kind of a crazy person for our client and do battle. And I always felt like, this is just kind of me maybe on a soapbox, I always felt like the practice of law has become less of a healing art as it could be and more of a weaponized, somehow we've weaponized the law when it was really meant to be something that maintains order and can actually be healing.
You're a counselor. You should be counseling your clients in order, giving them information so they can make good decisions.
Giving them information so they can make the decisions, right?
And good ones, yeah.
Okay, so here we are. We're in this. Maybe there's been an affair. Maybe somebody's just angry. Maybe they're just sick of each other. Someone's leaving someone usually. There's that song, hey, I want to sing another somebody done somebody wrong song.
Yep.
Yeah. That people don't come into my office necessarily happy.
Yep.
So the bottom line is the structure of the situation conduces to battle, conduces to a decrease in well-being, and we actually obviously come to the table or invite others to the table in a system that at least endeavors to allow people to survive this without making it worse. And we were discussing among ourselves that those people that can manage, actually, even as this process is ongoing, to tolerate each other, even, heaven, imagine this, to forgive each other right in the process, tend to wind up with what we call a better divorce story downfield. Mark, you were talking about some reading you did this week. Talk about that, please.
Yeah, there was an article I saw in the Manchester Guardian that talked about, it interviewed a number of people, some of them sort of the children of famous people, actually, who had gone through divorces, people who were in their late 20s into their 50s, who really had their own personal relationships deeply affected by their experience of their parents' divorce. One woman said, if there wasn't drama in a relationship, I didn't think it was real or intense enough, because there was always drama in our house. Another person said, I've avoided relationships all my life because I didn't want to go through what I saw my mom and dad go through. And these were sort of grown, ostensibly successful people who were traumatized by this. And I'm sure that not one of the parents wanted to traumatize their child.
And that other article, what was that again?
And the other article was, I'd read before, and I don't recall exactly where it is, but I'm going to try and research it. The idea was that there were couples who had divorced, sometimes a long period ago, and had maintained a good, strong friendship with their ex-spouse, even to the degree where one couple said, yeah, we talk about our I lost a spouse, but I got a friend, I think was the name of the article. It's just come to me. And so they had maintained a relationship, and partly a couple of them was because they wanted to co-parent. They wanted to raise children together and do it effectively. But the question I wanted to ask them is, well, how did you divorce? Did you go through the adversarial system? Because my suspicion is they didn't. Or if they did, they took control and said, this is how we're going to do it. They didn't let the lawyers take over and zealously advocate for their maximum share that they might possibly get.
So there's a firm in town that will remain nameless, and they have a billboard on the highway here in San Diego, and it's the bride and groom on the cake, and the bride has thrown the groom into a glass of water upside down. And that's kind of an attitude of like, we're going to throw this spouse away. I'm going to get rid of this person, knives coming out,
right,
and razor blades coming out. And that kind of imagery is very,
and it can be appealing when you're terrified and you don't know anything about the money and you just want to be protected, and somebody's wronged you and you feel that they can't trust them on that. You can't trust them on anything.
Well, let's be honest. I mean, there's fear and there's hurt. I mean, Scott, I'm speaking in your wheelhouse now. There's fear, there's hurt, and then there's just, you're pissed off. And sometimes those are the same emotion, just kind of presenting themselves in different ways, right?
Yeah, and there's also situationally, and now I'm in your wheelhouse, and
it's fine.
Kind of ignorance of what is possible. And I think that's really the heart and soul of what we're here for. There is something else that is possible. If you try to do this in a more peaceable way, I would say, even if it doesn't work, if for some reason or other, and we've had cases that have fallen out, not a lot, but some, where individuals will attempt to mediate and attempt to collaborate, but some outside instigative force, typically a parent or some other friend, will keep stirring the pot and saying, no, you need to do this, you need to do this. And then somebody takes off on a side agenda, and then it winds up getting litigated. But
yeah, it's kind of like what we were talking about last week with the road to hell and the well-intentioned friends.
Yeah, exactly. So it is possible. But where we began this podcast was in a discussion of what is an agenda for a psychological state going through this process that allows it not to get worse. There is a state, let us say, of actually being forgiving, of being tolerant of that other, opting to treat somebody in a way that you perhaps don't even yet feel like, but that is a possible choice. If you have just enough self-control remaining in this, and you opt for a less aggressive, more tolerant style, and then you get a response from the other person that is a response in kind, you can build a little bit of trust, one sliver at a time. And, what's going to happen in the course of your divorce, if you're mediating this, is you're going to have a series of little decisions, micro decisions that add up to the big decision of the MSA, of the whole program. Little decisions about money. What about this account? What about that account? What about a Thursday? Thursday, can I have the kids? Well, maybe Thursday would be okay. Well, no. Any of these little things that add up to the possibility of a little bit of trust, a little more trust, a little tolerance, and you wind up with another human being making agreements.
So you're saying it doesn't happen overnight?
Oh, well, I haven't. The only ones I've seen happen overnight were ones in which the individuals were already in that kind of condition, which, like what Mark talked about, individuals that started out almost friends, and it almost began their divorce from a friendly perspective. We just don't want to be married, but we want to be friends. That's the only ones I've seen happen overnight.
I mean, I get the ones where I had this case years ago where the lady was very hurt because the husband had an affair and had moved on. And she kept saying it with kind of like, looked like she'd swallowed a lemon the whole time. And she kept talking about the mistress. Well, you have the mistress and the mistress this. And she was just so fixated on that hurt that he had caused her. And frankly, the guy had hurt her. He had an affair, left her for another woman. Painful, right? So, and he knew it. But she took a long time to get past that. But there was a moment where she kind of realized, he's got a mistress, but I'm okay. And I'm going to have to move on. And she kind of let go of that lemon, I called it, in her mouth. And I liked seeing her later. I saw her a year after the divorce, and she looked physically better. She looked younger, more vibrant, because she had kind of taken this pain and removed it from herself. But it was a process.
So I would say this, that being strategic. So, sometimes you think, well, if I give her that after what she did for me, then I'm losing something because I'm wronged, and she should be apologizing. She should be the one to initiate this. Whereas if you think strategically, you're in a negotiation, probably the largest financial transaction of your lifetime. And what do you want the outcome to be? You want to be okay. And if you're being smart, you want your spouse to be okay, especially if you have children. So how do you get to that point? Just be strategic. If it's for a business negotiation, what would you do? So in a way, I could be Machiavellian and say, gosh, if I forgive that person, then first of all, I'm not having to carry that mantle, that awful pain and anger. But the other thing also is I may get a better deal. I probably will.
If you are not horrible to the ex while you're negotiating, you might actually do better. I catch more flies with honey than with vinegar.
It's amazing. I actually had a case one time when we were stuck. And I went out, I took the husband, we caucused. I took the husband out and I said, you know what? You've stumped the mediator. I don't know what to do with you two. I said, there's one thing though. We haven't tried generosity. I said, what if you offered her something that doesn't mean a whole hell of a lot to you, but you know she wants? How would that work? And we came up with something. We went back in the room. He offered it, and she said, well, if you do that, I'll do this.
And then it goes from there.
Well, if you do that, then maybe we could do this. And within the next meeting, we settled a very difficult case.
It's amazing what happens when the dam breaks.
Yeah.
I was thinking about, the clients that are in the beginning stages of the divorce and how they're just completely in fight or flight, or they're just angry, or they want to hate this person. And people, as they get farther into the process, I kind of say sometimes cases will ripen for settlement.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is they get to a place where, even though, the hurt isn't necessarily just going to go away. I don't want to minimize that, but
no,
they're to a place where the hurt doesn't matter as much as it did.
I think there's a reason for that, though, and it's a very good reason. And that is that in mediation, sometimes people actually engage. It's almost a new relationship. We do set some structures up around these people, and frankly, they're the structures of. It's a conditioning system. When people come into mediation, they're not going to scream and battle for the most part. Although we had one recently, Shawn, in which it started out that way, but it's like, Shawn pulled a stunt. Shawn, the most genteel, kind, mild-mannered person, lifted his fist and banged it on the table and basically paralleled this guy's rageful acting out, which kind of stumped him for a moment. It stopped him in his tracks. It's like, what? Anyway.
I was like, no!
Yeah, no, that's my role. But it is a different relationship. The mediative process is a relationship in itself. And in that environment, it's like the professionals reward almost like, well, it's a behavioral process. We reward positive behavior. And when that happens, the other person receives the benefit of it. It's not for us. So a little bit of generosity, a little bit of give. We tend to pay attention to zones of generosity that are already nested within their facts, and we bring it up for them. We help them see that they've already essentially conceded this point or that point. And once the rewards begin flowing, you can settle. And really, what's going to happen if you litigate this is that...
Well, you're settled because you're exhausted at the end. And I can say this from personal experience. It's basically, I didn't reach a conclusion. I just ran out of money and emotional energy to put into it.
Well, there's that. And then there's this numerical difference. It's dividing by 2 instead of dividing by 3. The professionals will battle for 1/3, essentially, of the estate, unless it's a monster. And even then they'll do that.
For sure. I mean, there was a shark here in town, and he used to tell me, this is how I know I've won a case. Each of the parties has about $150, and I have all the rest.
Well,
he meant it too. That's the kind of attorney he was. So there are attorneys like that. But I think also most attorneys are good people and want it to go well for folks. They just don't know how to do it, a lot of them. They don't know how to work with people in a way that is peaceful. We were talking about, we're coming into this. We want to be happy at the end. I've never had a client that says, I really would like to be miserable for the rest of my life, if we could, please. Nobody ever says that. No. They want to have some kind of a goal at the end of this process where, I think you said it, Mark, they're going to be okay. And they have reasonable prospects for happiness and peace in their lives.
So how do we get that?
How
about having a durable agreement? One that is not going to have to be revisited all the time, that you're not going to be constantly going back to court to fight about. How about an agreement you actually were involved in the creation of?
That you created.
And kind of buy into it. Yeah, and that you buy into it because it was you won't get everything you want in there, but you can have some of the stuff you want.
I mean, that's for sure. I'm always telling people, stay in charge. I mean, if you're going to cede your authority over your outcome to some stranger in black robes, you've now given up control. So stay in charge. The first thing to do if you want to have a happy ending is remain in control of your case and negotiate and reach settlements. What about all or nothing thinking? What does that do for being happy later?
It's a very natural process to devolve to all or nothing. It is, in most people's imagining, what we call a fixed sum game. There is a certain set of possibilities. There is a certain size of the estate. There is a certain period of time with the children. There's the marital home. There's typically only one of those, although some of our people have more. But people imagine that whatever I don't get is a loss, and whatever the other person gets is their gain. Hence, you fight for all of it and then hope to back into a posture of some fairness, some fairness. Another part of the process of mediation is a form of education that occurs. When we slow down this process and people stay in charge of it themselves, basically they are educating, and we help them, educating them to what the possibilities really are. Nobody's going to get it all. And if you take it to court, the division may have random factors in it. And there's only one element that you're sure of, which is that the professionals are going to take a huge amount. So we try to keep everybody's portion reasonable and sensible and negotiable, so that in the long term, there can be some comfort. No, you don't want to go negotiate it back in court again. But let's say there's enough flexibility and enough trust between these people that they can talk about who's going to be with the children on that special Thursday. And that it's not a big deal. You don't have to go through terrible suffering over it. I mean, I've seen people who really are both well-intended that have to swap the kids at the Starbucks at a certain hour every week. And if they miss that, they call the lawyer. If they're an hour late for some reason, it's calling the lawyer. That's too much suffering.
Well, what do I do? I want to have peace and I want to have a happy ending here, but the person on the other side that I'm trying to negotiate with is a terrorist. I'm having to negotiate with this person that acts in bad faith and does crazy stuff and tries to make me miserable at every turn. And it's impossible for me to have a good relationship with this person. What do you say to that person?
I say that what you think is possible may or may not be the case. May or may not be. That person may themselves be terrified also. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I've never met those. I've met them, and I don't blame them for going to a shark. But I would still say, you're going to wind up with just as good an agreement if you mediate, but it may be a different form of mediation. It may almost have an arbitrative element to it, where you hire it.
Well, a lot of what I do, and I'm sure you do this too, Scott, and I know Mark, to some extent you do this, is to, you've got this person that you really have a horrible time interacting with. To you, they're a terrorist. But if we could show you a way to interact with this person that will make them less terrorizing and make them could kind of help lubricate the ball bearings so that the interactions you have are not always horrible, would that be something you'd want to see? And I've never had anybody say, oh no, I always want to have horrible interactions. So I mean, there are skills that people like you, a psychologist, mediators can teach people. You get the hostile, horrible email, you get the screed, the novella sent to you about how you're everything but a human. How do you respond to that in a way that's going to de-escalate as opposed to escalate?
How do we do that, or how should the prospective client?
Well, I'm just saying that's a skill that people can learn, and we're happy to teach you. It's probably another podcast. But when you look at interactions with your former spouse as about how can I de-escalate the conflict, as opposed to, oh my gosh, this person said something that upsets me and now I'm going to escalate.
So what I like to do when I get that person in front of me is I like to ask them, I said, so can you explain to me what scares you about coming into mediation? Tell me what your fears are about it, because they're telling you how horrible the person is, but they're really telling you he could not operate in this, or she could not operate in this environment. And they might be right. There are some that cannot. That's absolutely correct. That's why we do need a legal system. But if you think about it, it's not usually the person focusing on what they're frightened of. They're just trying to defend a position by making the other person the problem.
I think that's true. And I think it's also, exercising some empathy. That's a skill that's sometimes hard for people, especially when you're upset. But exercising some empathy. Why is this person being jerky to me? And really, honestly.
Well, that's just what he's like. He's a vicious son of a...
Yeah, you're right. Something made him that way. Can you help me understand how he got there?
He's
really?
always...
Was he like that when you got married?
Yeah, that's the question. But
no, he changed.
I think it's disingenuous for us to pretend that those people don't exist. They do.
Oh, sure they do.
But there's
I'm saying
I want to say give us a shot.
Exactly. I'm saying
give us a shot.
So and I will add that Snow White rarely marries Jack the Ripper.
Oh yeah, I have one like that too. Mother Teresa doesn't marry Hitler.
Right.
Yeah, I mean that's true. I mean, water seeks its own level. We hear these things, but sometimes there's a horrible person on the other side. Maybe they have a mental health problem. Maybe they have a personality disorder.
I see that.
So, so what I'm saying is, okay, so this person's behavior is what it is. You're getting divorced because of it. Were you ever successful in changing their behavior during the marriage? The answer is no, because that's why you're in my office. So whose behavior can you possibly affect? And it's only you. You can only affect your own behavior. So the way you react to this person has a lot of play on how happy you're going to be. We are not computers. Just because I push your buttons, Mark, doesn't mean that you're going to react in a certain way. There's this space between stimulus and reaction where we have the ability for rational thought. But sometimes that's hard when you're emotionally triggered to stop for a moment and not let the emotional hijacking happen, and then have a rational, strategic response to this very difficult person.
So how are we able to be strategic? We need to have information. We need to be confident that we have all the information before we can make a decision.
I would say internally, the person, in order to be strategic, needs to have control of him or herself. Otherwise, all of these ideas go out the window. It's like it won't matter what your plans are if you're not managing yourself. And I think that's where the forgiveness comes in. If you can manage your own angers and your own rage, however justified, and not make them automatically turn into hostile retribution, you can work your way through the various decisions that are going to need to be made. And basically your relationship with yourself coming out of this thing is going to feel so much better than if you come out of this thing just feeling like, well, that person was a this and that, and so I was a this and that back, and by God, that's who we are, aren't we? If you come out of it going, well, you know what? Even if the other person was a what have you, I managed myself okay in this, and let's go. Life moves on.
And there is life after divorce.
Yeah, there is. That's what we learned in the Guardian article, even much later.
Yeah. Well, and you can let go of things. You can let go of needing to control the other person's behavior. You can let go of just being hurt and pissed off. I think, Mark, you were talking about forgiveness.
I had an experience with a business partner that I felt I'd been wronged in, and it was very difficult for me because I thought it was a close relationship. And I came to the conclusion that I did have to sit down with this person and talk to them and forgive them. Tell them why I was upset, but forgive them because it was hurting me. It was undermining me. And it was no gift to him. It was a gift to me as I look back on it. But it was hard to do because it felt like a gift to him. And I had to get over that.
What was hard about giving him a gift? Because he'd hurt you?
Because he'd hurt me, because I felt betrayed. I was angry.
Yeah.
So why would I want to give him anything? He took something.
Well, I've told this parable before, Scott, when we've had mediations together. How do you starve a monkey? And I don't remember which kind of monkey it is and which tribe in Africa or South America does this, but the way to starve this particular monkey is you put a cookie in a jar that's just small enough, just large enough for them to fit their hand in, but too small for them to extricate their hand if they have a fist. So you put your hand in, they put their hand in, and then they grab this cookie that they want to hold on to, and then they'll starve to death before they'll let go of that cookie. And I think we're kind of the same way with our anger and with our rage and the grudges we want to hold. There's that old saying, holding a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
So I guess what we're telling the people is that, if you break up the cookie gently, a little bit at a time, you're a much smarter monkey.
Well, okay. Yeah. Or just let go of the darn thing and go have some.
Or just take half of it, which is what you truly should be taking, and leave the other half for the other monkey that you're divorcing.
A little bit of it, and then that's right. Share the cookie.
Leave it to you two to ruin my analogy.
No.
No, I get what you're saying. Well, there was a guy I knew in Germany when I was a missionary in Germany, and he was a very active person in his church behind the Iron Curtain. They called him the Red Patriarch, and just an interesting guy. And I remember he said, nothing, he sees young people holding their fists up in anger. And he says, nothing ever solves your problems with a fist raised in anger. What actually solves your problem is when your hands are clasped in prayer. Now, I'm not suggesting that we get all too religious here, and although I don't think prayer hurt anybody or meditation, but just taking that moment and kind of going inward into yourself. And it is almost a spiritual journey to be able to let go of your rage and start to be productive and take control of your life rather than having this person that you're trying to divorce dominate your future, by just letting go of that anger and pain and moving on. And guys, I get it. It's easy for me to say. Not necessarily easy to do, but
no, it's hard to do.
It's almost a spiritual journey, isn't it? To kind of be able to let go of these.
I've always talked about divorce as a journey.
Yeah.
I think of it as that. And if you think about a journey, you choose a mode of transportation, right? And as you choose a mode of transportation, if you're riding a bicycle, it's different than taking a boat.
Can I take a tank?
Your experience will be different. Right. What about the terrain you're traveling through? Well, that's the relationship between you and your spouse. Are you getting along?
It's quicksand.
Yeah.
Or is it something else?
Even if somebody is prone to saying, "Oh, that's just a load because I'm never going to be able to be all sunshine, lollipop, and positive," I'm going to pick a middle state, and I'm going to call it being civil. If you can manage civility, just adequate decency, nothing grand, but nothing terrible, and you inaugurate micro agreements from that civil point of view, it leaves you open as soon as the other person is willing to respond in kind to begin to have this more tolerant, and if you're lucky and if you load it well yourself, more gracious and eventually more forgiving posture. And then you can be some of the people in Mark's article in The Guardian who actually had a more reasonable long-term effect in their lives.
And your children
will thank you
even if they never do.
Yeah.
So let's wrap it up then. So the moral of the story, from my point of view, let me see if I summarize this well for you guys. Begin with the end in mind when you start your divorce, and how happy you want to be when this is over. Do you want to be at peace, or do you want to be at war for the rest of your life? Don't cede control of your life to other people, whether that be a judge or whether it be the person you're divorcing. Am I right there?
Yes, or a hostily operating attorney.
Right? Don't give up control of your life. Stay in charge and be in charge of your own happiness. Don't give that power to the person that's causing you pain.
See if you can treat divorce as an opportunity. If you didn't understand a lot of what was going on with your kids because you were working all the time and you're going to be a divorced parent, see the opportunity of learning something more about your kids. If you never ran the money in the family, see the opportunity in actually getting competent in that area and becoming a self-fulfilled person in a way perhaps you weren't able to during the marriage.
Even if you're fearful of the outcomes, even if you feel like you're out of control, at least give the idea of negotiating this thing a shot. Give it a shot. Let's say you try to mediate and it fails because you were right, that other person is a beast. You can always move to that other level. But many, many times, people wind up much less happy and much more broke and much less in control of this process by going that way. Consider it.
Okay.
All right,
Well,
folks.
You want to get a hold of me to get a mediated divorce? WeberDisputeResolution.com. I'm Shawn Weber, WeberDisputeResolution.com. Mark?
I'm Mark Hill, Pacific Divorce Management, financial divorce consultant. You got a question about the money in divorce? Feel free to contact me through my website.
I'm Scott Weiner. I'm a clinical psychologist and attorney, mediator, and I operate out of my telephone, 619-417-5743 for consultation.
We wish everybody that's listened to this a pleasant journey and a happy future. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Three Wise Men of Divorce: Money, Psych, and Law. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share with others who may be in a similar place. Until next time, stay safe, healthy, and focused on a positive, bright future. This podcast is for informational purposes only. Every family law case is unique, so no legal, financial, or mental health advice is intended during this podcast. If you need help with your specific situation, feel free to schedule a time to speak with one of us for a personal consultation.